I never thought moving to a quiet neighborhood in Scottsdale, Arizona, would turn into a legal nightmare. But that was before I met Patricia Dennison, the HOA president who decided I was public enemy number one. The trouble started 3 weeks after I closed on my house in Desert Hills Estates, a planned community with terracotta roofs, manicured lawns, and apparently an HOA board with nothing better to do than make residents miserable. I had just finished installing new solar panels on my roof, which I had cleared with the Architectural Review Committee 2 months prior during escrow. The approval letter sat in my filing cabinet, signed and dated by Patricia herself. That Saturday morning, I was washing my truck in the driveway when a silver Lexus pulled up and parked at an angle that blocked half my driveway. Out stepped Patricia, a woman in her mid-50s with an aggressive blonde bob and oversized sunglasses that screamed suburbia. She marched toward me like she owned the place, which I guess in her mind, she kind of did. "Excuse me, but those panels on your roof are completely unacceptable," she said without introduction, pointing a manicured finger at my house. I turned off the hose and wiped my hands on my jeans. "I'm sorry, who are you?" "Patricia Dennison, HOA president, and those solar panels are in direct violation of our community standards." I felt my jaw tighten. "Actually, I have written approval from the Architectural Committee, dated March 2nd. You signed it yourself." Her face flushed red beneath her foundation. "That approval was given under false pretenses. You told us they would be low-profile panels that blend with the roof. These are the exact panels I specified in my application. Same brand, same model number, same color. Everything matches the documentation I submitted." Patricia crossed her arms. "Well, the board has reconsidered. You have 2 weeks to remove them or face daily fines of $200. You cannot retroactively revoke an approval that I relied upon and spent $15,000 to implement," I said, keeping my voice level despite my rising anger. "That's not how contract law works. This is not a debate, Mr. Harrison. 2 weeks." She turned on her heel and walked back to her Lexus, leaving me standing there with a half-washed truck and a growing sense that this woman was going to be a problem. The next day, I received a formal violation notice in my mailbox, typed on official HOA letterhead, citing my solar panels as unauthorized modifications. I immediately scanned my approval documents and sent a detailed email to the entire HOA board, attaching the signed approval and pointing out that I had followed every rule to the letter. I even included photos of the panels from the manufacturer's website that matched my original application. 3 board members responded privately, apologizing for the confusion and stating they would address it at the next meeting. Patricia sent a one-line reply, "Your installation violates community aesthetics. The violation stands." I consulted with a real estate attorney who specialized in HOA disputes. His name was Marcus Chen, and he had a reputation for not taking garbage from overreaching board members. After reviewing my documents, he drafted a strongly worded letter explaining that the HOA's retroactive revocation was legally baseless and that any fines would be challenged in court. He sent it via certified mail. Patricia did not take it well. 2 days later, I was working from home when my doorbell rang. I opened it to find a Scottsdale police officer standing on my porch, looking uncomfortable. "Are you Daniel Harrison?" he asked. "Yes, officer. Is something wrong?" He glanced at his notepad. "I need to ask you some questions about an incident involving Patricia Dennison. She filed a report claiming you threatened her." My stomach dropped. "I did what?" "According to her statement, you approached her vehicle on Saturday morning, became verbally aggressive, and threatened to make her regret crossing you. She says she felt unsafe and believes you may escalate to physical violence." I stared at him in disbelief. "Officer, that is completely false." She came to my property, told me to remove my legally approved solar panels and left. I never approached her car, I never threatened her. We had a brief disagreement, but I was completely civil. The officer studied my face. Do you have any witnesses or security footage? I have a Ring doorbell camera. It should have captured the entire interaction. His expression softened slightly. I would like to see that footage if you don't mind. I pulled up the video on my phone and showed him. The footage clearly showed Patricia parking, approaching me, our conversation, and her leaving. The audio was crystal clear. At no point did I raise my voice or make any threatening gestures. I remained standing in my driveway the entire time. The officer watched it twice, then nodded. This contradicts her statement entirely. I'll include this in my report. For what it's worth, I don't see any criminal behavior here. Looks like an HOA dispute. That's exactly what it is, I said. She's retaliating because I got a lawyer involved. I cannot speak to her motivations, but this footage is helpful. Have a good day, Mr. Harrison. After he left, I sat at my kitchen table feeling violated. Patricia had lied to the police about me. She had filed a false report to intimidate me into backing down. I forwarded the Ring footage to my attorney with a detailed explanation. Marcus called me within an hour. This is bad faith on steroids. She's opening herself up to serious liability. I'm going to send another letter, but Daniel, you need to be prepared for her to escalate. People like this don't back down easily. What else can she possibly do, in my experience? Anything she thinks she can get away with. He was right. The following Monday, I received a thick envelope from the Maricopa County Superior Court. Inside was a petition for an injunction against harassment, essentially a restraining order, filed by Patricia Dennison. My hands shook as I read through her allegations. She claimed I had engaged in a pattern of harassment over the past month, including repeatedly driving past her house, standing in my yard staring at her property, sending threatening emails, and making menacing comments during chance encounters. She stated she feared for her safety and needed court protection from my allegedly escalating behavior. Every single allegation was a fabrication. I had never driven past her house intentionally. I did not even know where she lived within our subdivision of over 300 homes. I had never sent her any personal emails, threatening or otherwise. My only correspondence had been the professional response to the violation notice, sent through my attorney. The menacing comments she referenced were apparently our single conversation about the solar panels, which my Ring camera had already proven was entirely civil. The petition requested that I be ordered to stay at least 300 feet away from her, her home, and her workplace. It also asked the court to prohibit any direct or indirect contact. The hearing was scheduled for 2 weeks out. I immediately called Marcus, who told me to come to his office right away. When I arrived, he was already drafting a response. "This is a slap suit disguised as a restraining order," he said, fingers flying across his keyboard. "She's using the legal system to silence and intimidate you. It's abusive process, and judges hate this stuff when they figure it out. Can she actually get a restraining order based on lies? Temporarily, maybe. These injunctions are easy to get on an emergency basis because the standard is low and the hearings are quick. But once we present evidence showing her allegations are false, it will fall apart. The question is whether the judge will sanction her for it. I want her sanctioned. I want consequences. She lied to the police and now she's lying to a court." Marcus looked up from his computer. "Then we're going to war. I'll need every piece of evidence you have. Security footage, emails, your location history from your phone, anything that can prove you weren't doing what she claims." Over the next week, I compiled everything. My Ring doorbell footage showed my comings and goings, proving I left for work each morning and came home each evening without detours. My phone's location history showed I had never been near her address, which I finally located through public records. She lived on the opposite side of the subdivision, a full mile from my house. My email records showed only the single professional response sent through Marcus. My neighbors provided written statements that they had never seen me acting strangely or loitering in my yard. I also discovered something interesting while reviewing HOA records. 3 other homeowners had been involved in disputes with Patricia over the past 2 years, and all 3 had eventually moved away. One had been forced to sell at a loss after Patricia generated so many violations and fines that the legal costs became unbearable. Another had simply abandoned the fight and complied with whatever unreasonable demands she made. The third had tried to recall her from the board, but Patricia had manipulated the process to ensure the vote failed. This was her pattern. She targeted homeowners who challenged her authority and used every tool at her disposal to break them. But I was not going to break. The hearing arrived on a Wednesday morning. I took the day off work and met Marcus at the courthouse at 8 in the morning. The Maricopa County Superior Court building was a modern glass and concrete structure in downtown Phoenix, busy with lawyers and litigants moving between courtrooms. We checked in at the clerk's office and waited in the hallway outside courtroom 7B. Patricia arrived 15 minutes later with her own attorney, a thin man in an expensive suit who looked like he handled real estate transactions, not restraining orders. She saw me and immediately moved to the opposite end of the hallway, making a show of being afraid, even though we were in a courthouse surrounded by security. Marcus noticed and smirked. "She's performing for the judge. Don't react. Don't even look at her." At 9 o'clock, we were called into the courtroom. The Honorable Judge Rebecca Martinez presided, a no-nonsense woman in her early 60s with dark hair pulled back in a bun and reading glasses perched on her nose. She had a reputation for running an efficient courtroom and not tolerating games. Patricia's attorney went first, summarizing her petition and emphasizing her fear for her safety. He painted me as an unstable neighbor who had become fixated on his client over a minor HOA dispute. He presented the petition's allegations as fact without providing any supporting evidence beyond Patricia's sworn statement. "Your Honor, Miss Dennison is a respected member of her community who has served as HOA president for 4 years," he said. "She has never experienced anything like this. Mr. Harrison's behavior has escalated to the point where she no longer feels safe in her own neighborhood. She simply asks for the court's protection so she can live without fear." Judge Martinez turned to Marcus. "Counsel, your response." Marcus stood, and I could see he was ready. "Your Honor, this petition is a fabrication from start to finish. Miss Dennison has not presented a single piece of objective evidence to support her claims, because no such evidence exists. What she has done is weaponize the legal system to retaliate against my client for exercising his legal rights." He approached the bench and handed the judge a thick binder. "Your Honor, I have provided a detailed response with exhibits that conclusively disprove every allegation. Exhibit A is security footage from my client's home showing the only in-person interaction between the parties, which was initiated by Miss Dennison and remained entirely civil. Exhibit B is my client's phone location history, proving he has never been to Miss Dennison's residence. Exhibit C is email correspondence showing no threatening communications. Exhibits D through F are witness statements from neighbors who confirm my client has not engaged in any of the alleged behaviors." Judge Martinez opened the binder and began reviewing the materials. The courtroom was silent except for the occasional rustle of paper. Patricia whispered something to her attorney, who looked increasingly uncomfortable. After several minutes, Judge Martinez looked up. "Miss Dennison, please approach the witness stand. You will testify under oath." Patricia stood and walked to the witness box where the clerk swore her in. She sat with her hands folded, looking every bit the frightened victim. "Miss Dennison," Judge Martinez began, "your petition states that Mr. Harrison has repeatedly driven past your residence. How many times?" "At least a dozen times over the past month, Your Honor." "And you're certain it was him?" "Yes, I recognize his truck." Judge Martinez glanced at the binder. "What color is his truck?" Patricia hesitated for a fraction of a second. "It's dark blue." "Actually, according to the vehicle registration in evidence, Mr. Harrison drives a silver Ford F-150. Do you want to revise your answer?" Patricia's face went pale. "I may have been mistaken about the color. It was definitely his truck, though." "Let's move on. You stated in your petition that Mr. Harrison stands in his yard staring at your property. How is that possible when, according to these property records, you live 1 mile away on the opposite side of the subdivision?" I meant when I drive past his house." "He stares at me when I drive by. So he stands in his own yard and happens to see you drive by." "It's more than that. It's the way he looks at me. It's threatening." Judge Martinez removed her glasses. "Miss Dennison, I have reviewed the security footage from Mr. Harrison's property. It shows you parking in his driveway, approaching him while he was washing his vehicle, engaging in a conversation that appears heated, and then leaving. At no point does Mr. Harrison approach you, raise his voice, or make any gesture that could reasonably be construed as threatening. In fact, he remains remarkably calm throughout." "Does this footage accurately depict what occurred?" Patricia shifted in her seat. "The footage doesn't show everything. It doesn't capture the tone of his voice, the look in his eyes." "The audio is quite clear, Miss Dennison. I heard no threats. What I did hear was you telling Mr. Harrison to remove solar panels that he apparently had written approval to install. Is that correct?" "The approval was a mistake. But it was given in writing by you as HOA president, was it not?" "Yes, but under false information." Judge Martinez held up a document. "I have the approval application here. It includes detailed specifications, model numbers, and manufacturer information. It also includes photos of the proposed panels." "Are you saying these were not accurate?" Patricia's attorney stood. "Your Honor, the underlying HOA dispute is not the matter before the court today." "Sit down, counselor. I'm establishing motive." "Miss Dennison, please answer the question." Patricia's voice was tight. "The photos may have been accurate, but the overall aesthetic impact was not made clear." "So the information was accurate, but you didn't like the result. And when Mr. Harrison retained an attorney to contest your retroactive revocation, you filed a police report claiming he had threatened you. Correct? He did threaten me." Judge Martinez pulled out another document. "The investigating officer's report states that security footage contradicted your allegations and that no criminal behavior was observed. Were you aware that filing a false police report is a crime in Arizona?" Patricia's hands gripped the edge of the witness box. "I did not file a false report. I felt threatened." "Feeling threatened and being threatened are two different things, Miss Dennison. Your subjective feelings do not create objective facts." Judge Martinez leaned forward. "I have been on the bench for 18 years, and I have seen many restraining order petitions. Some are legitimate cries for help from people in genuine danger. Others are tools of manipulation by individuals who want to control or punish someone they are in conflict with. This petition falls squarely into the second category." Patricia's attorney stood again. "Your Honor, I must object to this characterization. Your objection is noted and overruled. Miss Dennison, I am denying your petition for an injunction against harassment. The evidence presented by Mr. Harrison thoroughly refutes your allegations. Moreover, I find that you have abused the legal process by filing a petition based on false statements made under oath. The courtroom seemed to hold its breath. Judge Martinez continued, "Pursuant to Arizona Revised Statutes Section 12 to 349, I am imposing sanctions against you personally in the amount of $5,000 to compensate Mr. Harrison for his attorney fees and costs in defending against this frivolous action. Additionally, I am referring this matter to the Maricopa County Attorney's Office for investigation of possible perjury charges. Lying under oath in court documents is a serious matter, and there must be consequences." Patricia's face went from pale to bright red. "Your Honor, I was simply trying to protect myself." "You were trying to weaponize the court system against someone who had the audacity to stand up to you. That ends today. This hearing is concluded." Judge Martinez banged her gavel, and it was over. Marcus and I stood as the judge exited the courtroom. Behind us, I could hear Patricia arguing with her attorney in harsh whispers. We walked out into the hallway, and I felt like I could finally breathe. "Did that really just happen?" Marcus grinned. "Judge Martinez doesn't mess around. She saw right through it. And the perjury referral is the cherry on top. The county attorney may or may not prosecute, but it's going to hang over Patricia's head. What about the $5,000 in sanctions?" "That's a court order. She has to pay it. If she doesn't, we can garnish her wages or put a lien on her property. She's not getting out of it." We left the courthouse and grabbed coffee at a shop across the street. Marcus explained what would happen next. The sanctions order would be entered into the record, and Patricia would have 30 days to pay. The perjury referral would be sent to the county attorney's criminal division, who would review the case and decide whether to file charges. "What are the chances they'll actually prosecute?" I asked. "Hard to say. Perjury cases are difficult because you have to prove she knowingly lied, not just that she was mistaken or misremembered. But judges' referrals carry weight. At minimum, an investigator will contact her, which will scare the hell out of her. Good, she needs to understand there are consequences. Oh, she understands now. And word is going to spread through that HOA like wildfire. She'll have a hard time pulling this stunt on anyone else." I went home that afternoon feeling vindicated but exhausted. The stress of the past month had taken its toll. I had barely slept, constantly worrying about what Patricia might do next. But now it was over. The judge had seen through her lies, and she was facing real consequences. That evening, I received an email from one of the other HOA board members, a retired teacher named Dorothy Chen, who had always seemed reasonable. She congratulated me on the hearing's outcome and informed me that an emergency board meeting had been called for the following week to discuss Patricia's conduct. Apparently, several board members were disturbed by what had happened and wanted to address it. The emergency meeting took place in the community clubhouse on a Monday evening. I was not required to attend, but Dorothy had invited me as an observer. About 40 homeowners showed up, which was unusual for an HOA meeting. Word had spread. Patricia sat at the head table with 4 other board members, looking diminished. She avoided eye contact with everyone. Dorothy called the meeting to order and got straight to the point. "We are here to discuss recent events involving President Dennison and homeowner Daniel Harrison. As most of you are aware, Ms. Dennison filed a restraining order petition against Mr. Harrison that was denied by the court, and she was sanctioned for filing a frivolous action based on false statements. The board has reviewed the court documents and finds this conduct deeply troubling." Another board member, a man named Robert Singh who worked in IT, spoke up. "Patricia, you used your position as HOA president to target a homeowner who challenged a decision you made. You then lied to the police and lied to a court to try to intimidate him. This is completely unacceptable. You have damaged the credibility of this board and exposed the HOA to potential liability. Patricia's voice was defensive. I was acting in what I believed were the best interests of the community. By lying under oath, Dorothy's tone was sharp. By trying to get a restraining order against someone who did nothing wrong. Patricia, I have served on this board with you for 3 years, and I have watched you abuse your authority repeatedly. I stayed quiet because I wanted to avoid conflict, but I cannot stay quiet anymore. You have become a liability. A homeowner in the audience stood up. I was forced to sell my house 2 years ago because Patricia fined me into oblivion over minor issues. I lost $30,000 on that sale. If I had known, I could fight back like Mr. Harrison did, I would have. Another homeowner rose. She threatened to fine me for having a wreath on my door during summer. A wreath. She said it violated aesthetic guidelines, even though there is no rule against wreaths. More voices joined in. The room erupted with stories of Patricia's petty tyranny, her selective enforcement of rules, her hostile attitude toward anyone who questioned her. It was clear that she had created an atmosphere of fear, and people were finally feeling safe enough to speak out. Robert made a motion to remove Patricia as president, citing breach of fiduciary duty and conduct unbecoming a board member. Dorothy seconded it. The vote was unanimous among the 4 other board members. Patricia stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. You are all making a huge mistake. This association will fall apart without my leadership. I think we'll manage, Dorothy said coolly. Please return all HOA documents and property to me by the end of the week. Patricia grabbed her purse and stormed out of the clubhouse, slamming the door behind her. The room was silent for a moment, then someone started clapping. Others joined in. It felt like the community had just been freed from a dictator. After the meeting, several homeowners came up to thank me for standing up to Patricia. They said it had inspired them to speak out. Dorothy apologized on behalf of the board for everything I had been put through, and assured me the solar panel violation would be permanently withdrawn. Life started to return to normal over the following weeks. The HOA board elected Robert as the new president, and he immediately instituted reforms to make the approval process more transparent and fair. Patricia paid the $5,000 sanction, though Marcus had to threaten garnishment to get her to do it. She kept a low profile in the neighborhood, rarely leaving her house. Then, 6 weeks after the court hearing, I received a call from a detective with the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office. He introduced himself as Detective James Warren and asked if I could come to the station to answer some questions about Patricia Dennison. Is this about the perjury referral? I asked. It's related to that, yes. We've expanded our investigation based on what we found. I'd rather discuss it in person if you don't mind. I met Detective Warren at the sheriff's office the next morning. He was a stocky man in his 40s with graying hair and a forthright manner. He led me to an interview room and offered coffee, which I accepted. Mr. Harrison, I want to thank you for coming in. Let me explain what's happening. After Judge Martinez referred Miss Dennison's case to the county attorney, we started looking into her background. What we found was concerning. She has filed 4 restraining order petitions over the past 3 years, all against individuals she was in disputes with. 3 were granted on a temporary basis, but dismissed after hearings. The 4th was withdrawn before a hearing. She's done this to other people? Yes. 2 were neighbors from a previous community she lived in. 1 was a contractor who sued her for non-payment. 1 was a coworker before she retired. In each case, she made allegations of harassment or threats that could not be substantiated. We believe she has been systematically using restraining orders as weapons in personal disputes. I set down my coffee cup. That's insane. How did she keep getting away with it? Temporary restraining orders are easy to obtain because the standard is low, and they're based on the petitioner's sworn statement. Most people don't fight them because they're temporary and not worth the legal expense, but you fought yours and that exposed the pattern. So what happens now? Detective Warren leaned back in his chair. We're building a case for multiple counts of perjury and 1 count of abuse of process. Perjury is a Class 4 felony in Arizona. Given the repeated nature of her conduct, the county attorney believes prosecution is warranted. I wanted to talk to you to get your statement on record and to let you know this is moving forward. I gave Detective Warren a detailed statement about everything that had happened, from the solar panel dispute to the court hearing. He recorded it and had me sign a written version. He also asked for copies of all my evidence, which I provided. What are the chances she'll actually face charges? I asked as we finished up. I'd say very good. The county attorney doesn't bring cases like this unless they're confident. She'll likely be arrested, arraigned, and offered a plea deal. Whether she takes it or goes to trial is up to her. 2 weeks later, I was working from home when my phone buzzed with a news alert. The headline read, "Scottsdale HOA President Arrested on Perjury Charges." I opened the article and saw Patricia's booking photo. She looked angry and defiant, even in a mugshot. According to the article, Patricia had been arrested that morning and charged with 4 counts of perjury and 1 count of abuse of process. The charges stemmed from her repeated filing of false restraining order petitions. She had been released on her own recognizance pending trial. The article quoted the county attorney saying, "The legal system is not a weapon to be used against people you disagree with. Miss Dennison's repeated abuse of the court process will be addressed." I felt a grim satisfaction reading it. Patricia had spent years bullying people with no consequences, but she had finally pushed too far. The case moved slowly through the criminal justice system, as these things do. Patricia initially pleaded not guilty and hired a criminal defense attorney. The HOA board received a resignation letter from her 2 days after her arrest, though she no longer held any position to resign from. She put her house on the market a week later. I did not follow every development obsessively, but Marcus kept me updated on the major milestones. The prosecution offered Patricia a plea deal. Plead guilty to 2 counts of perjury, serve 1 year of supervised probation, pay restitution to all victims for their legal costs, and complete community service. She rejected it, apparently believing she could win at trial. That turned out to be a miscalculation. The trial took place 9 months after the initial restraining order hearing. I was called as a witness, along with the other people Patricia had targeted. One by one, we testified about her false allegations and the impact they had on our lives. The contractor she had accused described having to spend $8,000 on legal fees to defend himself. One of her former neighbors testified about the emotional distress of being falsely accused of stalking. Patricia's defense was that she had genuinely believed she was in danger each time, and that her fears were reasonable given her experiences. Her attorney argued that being wrong about feeling threatened is not the same as lying. The prosecutor dismantled that argument by showing the pattern. In each case, Patricia had made specific factual allegations that were proven false, not just expressed general fear. She had claimed the contractor came to her house on specific dates when he was provably elsewhere. She had claimed a neighbor stood outside her window on nights when that neighbor was out of town. She had claimed I had driven past her house when location data showed I had not. These were not mistaken perceptions, they were fabricated facts. The jury deliberated for 3 hours and found Patricia guilty on all counts. At sentencing, Judge Martinez once again presided. She noted Patricia's lack of remorse and the harm she had caused to multiple individuals. She sentenced Patricia to 2 years in prison on each perjury count, to run concurrently, with all but 6 months suspended. That meant Patricia would serve 6 months in county jail, followed by 18 months of supervised probation. She was also ordered to pay over $30,000 in restitution to her victims and complete 200 hours of community service. Patricia was led out of the courtroom in handcuffs, finally facing real consequences for her actions. I did not attend the sentencing in person, but Marcus was there and called me afterward. "It's done, she's going to jail." "How do you feel about it?" I asked. Honestly, satisfied. She hurt a lot of people and never thought she'd be held accountable. Now she is. The system worked the way it's supposed to. I agreed. I had never wanted to be involved in a legal battle, but I was glad I had fought back. If I had not, Patricia would have continued her pattern of abuse, and more people would have suffered. Life in Desert Hills Estates improved dramatically after Patricia's removal. Robert turned out to be an excellent HOA president, focused on maintaining property values and community amenities rather than exerting control over residents. The board revised several outdated rules and established a clearer process for disputes. Violations were handled with warnings and reasonable timelines rather than immediate fines. My solar panels continued generating electricity without issue, and I never received another violation notice. Several other homeowners installed solar after seeing my success, and the board approved each application without drama. I did run into Patricia one more time, about 2 years after everything ended. I was shopping at a grocery store in North Scottsdale when I saw her in the produce section. She had lost weight and looked older. Her blonde bob was gone, replaced by graying hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. She saw me at the same moment I saw her. For a second, I thought she might say something, but she just turned and walked away quickly, abandoning her cart. I felt a twinge of something, not quite pity, but perhaps sadness that someone had destroyed their own life through petty vindictiveness. I finished my shopping and went home, grateful that chapter of my life was closed. Looking back, the whole experience taught me important lessons about standing up to bullies, even when they hide behind official titles and legal processes. Patricia had counted on people being too intimidated or too tired to fight back. She had perfected a system of harassment that worked because most people would rather give in than endure the stress of a legal battle. But sometimes you have to fight, not just for yourself, but for everyone who comes after you. My willingness to stand up to Patricia had freed an entire community from her tyranny and prevented her from victimizing others. That was worth the stress, the legal fees, and the months of uncertainty. The $5,000 in sanctions I received helped offset my legal costs, though Marcus gave me a substantial discount on his fees given the principal involved. The restitution I eventually received from Patricia covered the rest. More valuable than the money was the peace of mind that came from knowing I could live in my home without someone manufacturing reasons to harass me. The HOA itself became a model for other communities in the area. Robert was invited to speak at a regional HOA conference about governance reform and preventing board abuse. He always credited the Patricia situation as the catalyst for positive change, though he was diplomatic enough not to name her directly in public forums. As for me, I became more involved in the HOA as a regular member, attending meetings and volunteering for committees. I wanted to ensure the reforms Robert implemented would outlast his presidency. I also became something of an informal advisor to homeowners in other communities who were dealing with similar issues. Word spread about how I had successfully fought back against an abusive board president, and people reached out asking for advice. I always told them the same thing. Document everything, know your rights, don't be afraid to hire an attorney, and never back down from a bully. The legal system has its flaws, but it can work when you present clear evidence and stand firm. One of the most gratifying outcomes was hearing from the homeowner who had been forced to sell at a loss years earlier because of Patricia's harassment. He reached out after reading about her conviction and thanked me for doing what he had not been able to do. He said it gave him closure to know she had finally faced consequences. We met for coffee, and he told me stories about Patricia's reign of terror that made my experience seem mild by comparison. She had truly made people's lives miserable for years. The contractor Patricia had falsely accused also contacted me. His name was Miguel Ramirez, and he owned a small landscaping company. Patricia had hired him to renovate her backyard, then refused to pay the final invoice claiming his work was substandard. When he filed a mechanic's lien and sued for payment, she retaliated by seeking a restraining order claiming he had threatened her. The temporary order forced him to stay away from her property, which complicated his lien rights. By the time the restraining order was dismissed, she had declared bankruptcy to avoid paying him. She cost me $15,000 and nearly destroyed my business, Miguel told me over the phone. I was so angry, but I didn't know what to do. Seeing her go to jail felt like justice, even though I never got my money back. Did you get restitution through the criminal case? I asked. Some, not the full amount, but enough to help. And honestly, just knowing she was held accountable mattered more than the money. These conversations reinforced my belief that I had made the right choice in fighting Patricia. She had left a trail of victims, and my case had finally stopped her. The criminal justice process had been slow and sometimes frustrating, but ultimately effective. Detective Warren had done thorough work building the case, and the prosecutor had presented it clearly. The jury had seen through Patricia's lies, and Judge Martinez had imposed a sentence that balanced punishment with rehabilitation. I later learned that Patricia had struggled in jail. She was not accustomed to being told what to do or having her authority questioned. Guards reported that she frequently complained and tried to assert dominance over other inmates, which did not go well for her. She served her full 6 months without early release for good behavior, which told me she had not adjusted well to incarceration. After her release, Patricia moved out of state. I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that she went to live with a sister in Colorado. She sold her house at a significant loss because the criminal case had become public knowledge, and some buyers were turned off by the association. I felt no sympathy. She had brought it all on herself. The HOA board established a memorial fund in honor of responsible governance, using surplus funds to provide legal assistance grants to homeowners involved in legitimate disputes with vendors or neighbors. It was a small way to ensure that people in our community would not face the kind of financial burden I had faced when defending myself. Robert served as president for 4 years before declining to run again, citing a desire to travel with his wife during retirement. The board elected Dorothy as his successor, and she continued his reforms. The culture of the HOA remained positive and collaborative, a stark contrast to the atmosphere of fear Patricia had created. I eventually became close friends with several board members and homeowners who had been involved in the Patricia saga. We would occasionally get together for barbecues or game nights, and the story of how the community stood up to a tyrant became part of our shared history. New residents would hear the tale and express amazement that it had really happened. My solar panels continued to function perfectly, saving me hundreds of dollars a month on electricity. Every time I looked at them, I thought about how close I came to giving in to Patricia's demands just to avoid conflict. I was proud of myself for standing firm. The legal battle also taught me about the importance of evidence in any dispute. My Ring doorbell footage had been crucial in disproving Patricia's initial allegations. My phone's location history had proven I never went to her house. My meticulous record-keeping had provided the paper trail needed to show the HOA approval was legitimate. Without that evidence, the case would have been my word against hers, and the outcome might have been different. I started advising friends and family to invest in home security cameras and to keep detailed records of any disputes. You never know when you might need to prove the truth. Marcus Chen remained my attorney for other matters over the years, and we developed a friendship beyond the professional relationship. He told me the Patricia case was one of his favorites because it so clearly illustrated the principle that the law protects people who stand up for their rights. He used it as an example in seminars he taught about HOA law. "Most people don't realize how much power they have," Marcus said during one of our lunches. "They think the HOA is all-powerful, but it's not. HOAs are bound by their own governing documents and by state law. When they step outside those bounds, they can be challenged. Your case proved that." I was terrified the whole time, I admitted. I kept thinking, what if the judge believes her? What if I lose? That's natural. But you had the evidence on your side, and that made all the difference. Patricia thought she could lie her way through it, but she underestimated how thoroughly you had documented everything. The Maricopa County Attorney's Office later issued a press release about the case, highlighting it as an example of holding people accountable for abusing the legal system. The release noted that filing false restraining orders wastes court resources, harms innocent people, and undermines the credibility of genuine victims who need protection. It warned that such conduct would be prosecuted aggressively. I hoped the message would deter others from following Patricia's playbook. In the years since, I have lived peacefully in my home in Desert Hills Estates. The neighborhood remains beautiful and well-maintained, the HOA functions smoothly, and I have never had another serious dispute with anyone. My solar panels continue to generate clean energy, and I have even added battery storage to maximize their efficiency. Sometimes I think about what might have happened if I had backed down. If I had removed the panels to appease Patricia, if I had accepted the restraining order rather than fight it, I would have lost my investment, sacrificed my principles, and allowed a bully to win. Worse, Patricia would have continued terrorizing other residents, emboldened by another easy victory. Instead, I fought back, and that decision changed everything. It freed a community, stopped a serial abuser, and sent a message that abuse of power has consequences. It was exhausting and stressful, but it was worth it. The story of HOA Karen who filed a restraining order based on lies, only to have it thrown out and face criminal charges herself, became a cautionary tale in Scottsdale and beyond. Local news covered the case, and HOA reform advocates cited it as an example of why boards need oversight and accountability. I never sought attention or publicity, but I did speak to a reporter who was writing about HOA abuses. I wanted people to know that you can fight back against petty tyrants, even when they seem to hold all the cards. The article quoted me saying, "The legal system is not perfect, but it can work if you have patience, evidence, and the courage to stand up for yourself." That quote was picked up by several HOA reform blogs and websites. I received emails from people across the country who were dealing with similar situations, thanking me for sharing my story and asking for advice. I tried to respond to as many as I could, offering encouragement and practical tips. The experience made me an accidental activist for HOA reform. I testified before the Arizona State Legislature when a bill was introduced to increase transparency and accountability in HOA governance. The bill ultimately passed, requiring HOAs to provide clearer notice of violations, establishing mandatory mediation for certain disputes, and creating a state ombudsman to investigate complaints of board abuse. I was proud to have played a small role in that legislative change. It would not have happened without Patricia's extreme conduct bringing attention to the issue, but it was a positive outcome from a negative situation. As I sit here now, years removed from the chaos, I feel grateful for how things turned out. My home is my sanctuary, just as it should be. I have good relationships with my neighbors and the HOA board. I have no outstanding legal disputes. Life is peaceful, but I also remain vigilant. I know that abuse of power can happen anywhere, and that standing up to it requires courage and resources that not everyone has. I try to be a resource for those who need help, whether that is sharing my story, offering advice, or contributing to legal defense funds for people fighting their own battles against HOA overreach. Patricia Dennison taught me an important lesson, though not the one she intended. She taught me that bullies rely on people being too scared or too tired to fight back. She taught me that the legal system, for all its flaws, can deliver justice when you present clear evidence and refuse to back down. She taught me that standing up for yourself can have ripple effects that benefit many people beyond just yourself. I would not wish the experience on anyone, but I do not regret it. It made me stronger, more informed, and more committed to holding powerful people accountable for their actions. It also gave me a great story to tell at parties. The restraining order that Patricia filed based on lies was indeed thrown out by a judge who saw right through her fabrications. That judge then sanctioned her, referred her for criminal prosecution, and set in motion a chain of events that led to Patricia's conviction and incarceration. Justice was served, slowly but surely. And I got to keep my solar panels.